Hey everyone, Joe here. It's been over a month since the last video, but I have been streaming, so if you missed me or whatever, you know, what are you doing? Get subscribed, hit the little clicky thing. It's right down there. Okay, today we're gonna talk about Halo Combat Evolved, a truly formative game for myself and pretty much every other millennial who owned an Xbox in 2001 instead of a PlayStation. I'm not going to bother too much with the lore external to the games, as Halo has a massive canon, which has over time formed an Ouroboros of retcons and perspective shifts that people with more time than me have already broken down elsewhere. That being said, like most videos in this series, we have to start with some context before we get into Halo's actual plot, as well as some commentary on the game design and its importance to yours truly. I've put timestamps in the doobly-doo if you want to skip to certain sections or if you're just here for a specific topic. So yeah, just check that out. There's the timeline. You can just select whatever part of the video you want to watch. If you don't want to watch the whole thing, yeah. Like I said a minute ago, if you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do that. It really helps. And before we continue, I'd appreciate maybe a little like as well. It's right beside the subscribe button. Thanks. Now let's talk about what really happened in Halo Combat Evolved. As I've already mentioned, Halo has a vast universe of lore. Much like the Half-Life series, which I've broken down already, link in the doobly-doo, most of Halo's more substantial lore doesn't come from the text of the games themselves. At least, that was the case for the first few titles. That's why I've decided that rather than covering these games based on the timeline within the Halo series, which would start with Halo Reach if we're sticking to the first-person shooters, I'll instead be covering these titles in the order of their chronological release. There is, however, some helpful context from the books and from Reach that I think makes Halo Combat Evolved a slightly more interesting and meaningful story, so let's go over some of that. Oh, and if you want a deeper dive into the full timeline of the Halo universe, Same Token did a phenomenal video on the subject that I've linked in the doobly-doo as well. Playing through Combat Evolved, it's easy to see what Microsoft saw in the project when they bought it out from under Apple's nose in 2000. It's a shameless run and gun set in a brand spanking new IP, with a marketable lead, aliens that can easily be made into merch, and zombies in fucking space. There are few things that could get my teenage self more excited than zombies in space, and most of that list wasn't exactly SFW. But my point is that the first Halo title didn't need to be anything other than a reason to buy an Xbox at the time of its release. This left Halo Combat Evolved with very little emphasis on its plot at launch, but we're gonna fill in those blanks. Throughout the Halo series, you play as Master Chief, John 117, a medically and bionically enhanced soldier who was raised from childhood to be a practically perfect fighter and squad leader. John 117 and his fellow child soldiers from the Spartan II program were originally conscripted by Dr. Catherine Halsey to quell the insurrectionist movement. Those insurrectionists were citizens from the outer colonies of the now spacefaring human race who felt they weren't being well enough represented or respected by their government, considering they were providing nearly all of the resources necessary to run the inner colonies. So basically think Star Wars prequels with a hefty helping of the Indian independence movement and a tasteful soupçon of Nazi apologia, all wrapped in anti-socialist rhetoric. Anyway, these child soldiers were proven invaluable in taking down insurrectionists. So when humanity came across their first sentient alien life, known as the Covenant, Master Chief and other Spartan IIs became the hammer to their nail. Eventually, the Spartan III program would adapt Halsey's techniques used on child soldiers into a slightly more woke version that could enhance your average Marine, though to a lesser extent, yielding a massive army of more expendable lower-class citizens instead of child conscripts. Wait, I'm sorry, that's an ad for the US Marines. I don't know how that got in here. Let's get back to Halo. This won't be remarkably important until later, but a primary motivation for the Covenant to seek out humanity in the first place was the existence of artifacts from an early race of proto-humans known as the Forerunner. I'm heavily simplifying this. I know humans and Forerunner basically existed at the same time, but I don't have the mantle of responsibility here. Don't at me. The Forerunner Empire spanned practically all of the known universe at one point or another, but they were almost completely destroyed by a parasitic species known as the Flood. Those are the space zombies. Again, I'll direct you to Same Token's Halo timeline if you want more info on how that happened. The important thing to take away here is that because of the nearly identical DNA between Forerunner and humans, and technically the humans helped build the Forerunner architecture, but again, I'm simplifying here so we don't have to go into that. The latter have the ability to activate and control Forerunner technology. You see, the Covenant have it in their heads that certain Forerunner artifacts, called Halo arrays, will bring about their version of a sort of second kingdom. That's not to say they knew everything about the ring worlds and their destructive capacity before combat evolved, but it's made clear that the Covenant, or at least their political leaders, have the ability to read the Forerunner language. So it stands to reason that this apocalyptic end goal might have been the reason the Covenant were looking for humans all along. It's also important to know that the Forerunner heavily relied on artificial intelligence to manage their advanced systems and to help govern their society. When we're introduced to modern humans in Halo CE, they've developed a similar reliance on AI, though more specifically for research and military use. Depending on what source you believe, as I mentioned, Halo's canon is a bit haphazard. The reason the Pillar of Autumn is seen fleeing through slipspace at the beginning of the game varies. But basically they were trying to keep their shipboard AI, Cortana, from being captured by the Covenant. As for why Master Chief is in cryosleep at the beginning of this game, that's also not totally explained. But it's probably because he would have been considered non-essential crew, and the UNSC likes to minimize the use of resources like food and water during long trips through slipspace. With that brief explainer out of the way, it's time to wake the Chief. Our story begins on the Pillar of Autumn. Emerging from a 3-week stint in slipspace in an attempt to flee the Covenant, Commander Keyes assesses their situation with the help of Cortana. It turns out the Covenant beat them to their exit point, tracking them despite the ship running dark. Cortana explains
they were waiting for us on the far side of the planet,
and Keyes decides it's time to wake everyone up and prepare for battle.
Well, that's it then. Bring the ship back up to Combat Alert Alpha. I want everyone at their stations.
Oh, he means everyone.
Everyone, sir?
Everyone.
Everyone!
Let's give our old friends a warm welcome.
Yeah, it's the Chief. You're supposed to be excited because he's talking about Master Chief. I don't remember the cryotex looking demonically possessed when I played this at the age of 12, so I'm going to assume that's an issue with the newer game engine. This footage is from the anniversary edition of the game, by the way. I thought about switching back and forth to show the differences for a segment, but honestly there are so many videos out there that already do that, so we'll focus on the modern version for this breakdown. Because honestly, if you haven't ever played this game before, these are probably the textures you're going to be seeing when you play the game nowadays. Master Chief awakens from cryosleep, and we get the most tenuous of diegetic tutorials as he learns how to look around while wearing a spacesuit.
Stand on the red square, please.
You remember when games used to do this shit? Like, the ship is in the process of being boarded, and this guy wants me to stand in the yellow square? Of course, in true action game fashion, seconds later the guy on the loudspeaker is given a name.
You'd better get to your evac group, Sam.
Affirmative. I just have to reset the computer and I'm out of here.
Only to be immediately killed by the invading forces.
Security! Intruders in Cryo 2! Please don't!
Sam! Sam! Come on, we've got to get the hell out of here.
So we get the hell out of there, and well, these boys just can't win, huh? The next minute or so sees Chief making his way through varying amounts of crossfire on his way to the bridge to meet with Captain Keyes.
Good to see you, Master Chief. Things aren't going well.
Gee, you think? After Cortana brags about her KD spread and the Chief entertains some playful robophilia, the attack on the Autumn intensifies. Keyes decides to do the whole going down with the ship thing and explains Cortana's safety is the top priority. He'll attempt to land the Pillar of Autumn on this strange ring world they've found floating in space, and Cortana will escape with the Chief. This isn't just because Cortana was being set up as a fantasy Vocaloid waifu for every hetero boy that would eventually play the game, but rather because the Covenant still have very limited knowledge of humanity and of Earth, and the Captain would like to keep it that way. Having sorted herself for hard transfer.
Yank me.
God, I can't do this without making it sound dirty. Cortana puts her disc in Chief, and the captain sends out the order to abandon ship. I should remind anyone watching at this point that I'm terrible at first-person shooters, so you're going to have to accept a certain level of cringe going forward in the footage. Also, for those unfamiliar, the Halo games used a sort of cheat code / Easter egg system of skulls that you could find on each level, which would unlock certain abilities or modify gameplay in some way when recovered. In the Master Chief Collection on PC, which is what I'm playing here, these skulls are all selectable from the start, so I've decided to leave the Grunt birthday party skull on. Honestly, I consider it sacrilege to play without it. Anyway, as more lifeboats leave, it becomes clear that the Covenant is using the open bays as boarding points, further complicating the escape plan. Most troops begin to fall back into defensive positions, leaving the Chief to gun down the invading Covenant. Chief gets the classic motion tracker we all know and love after sneaking through these access tunnel thingies, and we see that the Covenant knew where he had been sleeping. Now that things are a little more personal, the Chief and Cortana book it to an escape pod. Or at least, that's the idea. For some reason, I completely lost the path here and had to loop around a bit. This is odd, too, because of Bungie's approach to... Well, maybe it's time for one of these. I'd like to have a little chat about visual cues and how they turn good game design into legendary game design. I talked about this in my review of Minecraft Dungeons a while back, link up in the top and in the doobly-doo, and it holds true for most 3D games that when a designer is putting together a level, they're rarely drafting, editing, and rendering said level from the perspective of the player. In a large enough studio, you'll have multiple people working on different steps of that process on different floors of an office building without any communication between them outside of dailies on Trello. I've linked an article in the description if you're interested in the various software and tools that level designers use, but my point is the people who actually make the game, especially in big studios, often won't know exactly what a player's experience of a level is going to be until it goes into testing. This means that when you're designing a level and you don't want it to be linear, but you also don't want the player to get lost, the lead designer must make sure this core aspect of the experience is considered from start to finish and every step in between. This is compounded in fast-paced shooters like Halo, which need the player to enter encounters on a regular rhythm, but still want to maintain the illusion of an immersive and lived-in world. So what's the solution? How do you keep a player heading in the right direction without thinking about it? Civil engineering! That's right, the design principles that go into telling people which train to take and how far apart to stand while waiting, please just wear a mask and read signs, people, are the very same principles you can use to guide players through your level. We're trained pretty much from birth to recognize certain colors and symbols and associate them with abstract concepts like stop and go or hey, it's this way. The thing is, the average gamer doesn't want to be talked down to, and if you're trying to make your world feel real, you don't want to make that hand-holding obvious either. After all, flashy arrows and quest markers are more at home in side-scrollers and MMORPGs, not your AAA cinematic shooter. Or at least, they shouldn't be. Looking at you, every modern AAA first-person game. Ultimately, there are two ways to go, and I think Halo makes effective use of both methods. The first is to use diegetic cues. Like we talked about in my video on Hellblade, diegetic elements are basically things that exist fully within the fiction of the game world. In the game's opening chapter, as you navigate the winding corridors of the Pillar of Autumn, which is practically just a military base with a slip space engine attached, your eyes will naturally be drawn to pathfinding cues like arrows on the ground and color-coded markers. This doesn't feel jarring or cheesy though, because it makes sense to have these sort of efficient navigation cues in a work environment like this one. These are the kinds of guiding signs that new crew members would use to learn how to get around, so it makes sense that so many games take this approach to their intro levels. And the player doesn't question it, because they would also be relying on these cues were they in that situation themselves. They just sort of passively accept the help like so many socially engineered worker drones. I couldn't find a good term for the other method I was thinking of, so I'm going to call these artistic cues, which, just like thoughtful design from my last video, I am pulling completely out of my ass. This is when a designer uses some abstract concept, such as a simple pattern, the use of contrast and lighting, or a subtle difference in color or texture to guide the player. Sometimes these can be a bit more obvious, like shining a single spotlight at the end of a hallway, or color-coding your bases on multiplayer maps. Actually, I think Halo tends to lean toward the obvious, but there are more subtle ways to accomplish this too. Bungie often makes use of simple geometric patterns or large, low-poly shapes to suggest directionality in an environment that would otherwise be flat and stagnant. Take a simple look around at any point on a human ship, or in most environments on the Halo installation, and you can pretty quickly get a sense of where you should go. Only occasionally did Bungie find it necessary to throw a bunch of glowing lights in your path, just to be sure. Ultimately, you want your player to be able to navigate your levels easily without having to think too hard about where they're going, and without being made to remember that they're playing a game. I think Combat Evolved accomplishes this pretty consistently. The big exception to this would be the levels you spend on Covenant ships, which have a unique aesthetic, but are ultimately pretty alien to attempt to... Oh, I get it. Those levels are still terrible, though. Speaking of levels, we should probably move on to the next one.
Oh no! Oh no!
Now would be a very good time to leave.
Finally boarding a lifeboat, Master Chief decides to show everyone he's too alpha for a seatbelt, and some of the Marines are justifiably freaking the fuck out about the situation they're in. It's pretty clear the only place to go is the planet-sized space ring nearby, so they prepare for an emergency landing, as Captain Keyes decides to manually pilot the Pillar of Autumn to do the same, going directly against Cortana's suggestion.
I knew it. The Autumn's accelerating. Keyes is going in manual.
You know, I'm beginning to see why Cortana's character arc goes where it does in Halo 5, and presumably Infinite.
You sure you wouldn't rather take a seat?
We'll be fine.
She keeps providing sound advice, and the men around her keep ignoring it.
We're coming in too fast! Damn! Air brake failure! They blew too early! I'm losing her! Brace for impact!
Anyway, while the Chief is fine thanks to his Mjolnir armor, the rest of the passengers didn't fare so well.
Yeah, there's the impact. There's nothing we can do.
Cortana acknowledges this isn't the time to be holding multiple funerals, and urges the Chief to take cover in some nearby hills. But it becomes apparent that the Covenant are already here, and the action resumes. God, I love that. Master Chief quickly stumbles along a group of survivors led by Sergeant Johnson, who has a surprisingly thorough backstory detailed elsewhere in the Halo canon. The Chief helps dispatch a few aliens, and we learn there are more survivors than we thought. After Pelican Echo 419 makes contact, we have a new mission. Find all the lifeboats and round up the survivors. This Pelican is also lovingly nicknamed Foehammer, which I choose to believe is a reference to Gandalf's sword in Lord of the Rings. Driving around in this Warthog gave me a hit of nostalgia I wasn't fully prepared for, but despite the emotional high I was feeling, I have to point out that the way vehicles work with a keyboard and mouse is just... well, it's not ideal. Still, Cortana points out this cave that she suspects might not be a natural formation, and our merry band sets off to investigate.
Master Chief, I'm going to use your suit's transcom system to monitor their chatter.
With this knowledge, Cortana can use the Chief's comm system to monitor the Covenant BattleNet, which is super convenient for us. It's here that I also found one of the terminals hidden throughout the game. These were added in the Anniversary Edition, and interacting with them plays a little cinematic that provides some additional lore. I'm a big fan of games including little secrets like this, and I'll definitely have to do another playthrough to find all of the skulls, like the Grunt birthday party one I mentioned earlier. At some point, Master Chief turns on a bridge made of hard light. The name pretty much explains what it is, and in crossing it, our party emerges into a hilly canyon with multiple paths to choose from. Following the blinky lights, we come across multiple smaller areas where we have to fight off the Covenant long enough to get our comrades out of the fray.
I've spotted additional lifeboats in your area. One near a rock slide, and another near the head of the river.
Upon rescuing the first group, Dora the Pelican pilot gives Cortana directions, and you head out. Once you've helped Foehammer rescue each group, Cortana gets an update on the location of Captain Keyes.
I found Captain Keyes. He's being held on a Covenant cruiser, the Truth and Reconciliation, a ship I disabled before we abandoned the Autumn.
God, these ship names are so good. The plan is to board the ship via the grav lift, at which point Cortana should be able to use the captain's neural implant to track him down. This leads to a short attempt at a stealth mission as Master Chief bashes and headshots his way through a series of Covenant encampments. As poor as this stealth system is, if you could call it that, I did thoroughly enjoy playing through this level again. Once inside, we get a lock on the captain's transponder, or whatever, and get our hands on some Covenant cloaking tech. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but this level is just not fun. And the updated textures used in the MCC version I'm playing here make the previously bland corridors in which Master Chief spends the majority of his time into what may as well be a laser tag arena. After enough ambling, I stumbled across another terminal, and this might be a good time to talk about how world building works in the Halo games. Which is to say, the world building in the first 3 Halo games is so transparently thin, it's basically non-existent. You get the sense that there's a world outside of Master Chief that seeks to place him in some kind of struggle, and he exists simply to overcome these struggles regardless of the motivation. This is especially true for Combat Evolved, in which the thin strands of story are communicated through brief cutscenes and quippy one-liners delivered by pretty much everyone except Master Chief. Hell, a primary plot point we'll see later would have Master Chief nearly eradicating all human life if not for Cortana's intervention after he decides to follow the orders of another AI that he literally just meets in the woods. He's so good at following orders and carrying out whatever task is required of him without question that it's actually detrimental to those nearest to him. You could make a case that this is some kind of allegory for the player, because if you're taking control of the Chief, then by extension, all of the purposeless violence he commits is sort of on you. But I think that would only be a reasonable analysis if the game actually gave the player some kind of choice, and the player still chose to follow those orders without question. Put a pin in that idea for a later video though. Instead, I think this says more about the development of Halo, and how rushing out a game to meet a deadline can lead to a potentially irreversible reliance on transmedia to tell your story. We're not going to get into semiotics and narratology and all that postmodern shit here, but for the sake of clarity, transmedia storytelling is basically when you tell a story or set of stories over multiple forms of media and or an extended period of time. I'll link an article in the doobly-doo about Halo's growing transmedia problem from earlier this year. Polygon's own Brian David Gilbert also did a video recently about the massive volume of text in Halo's canon, and it's important to understand that the vast majority of players, even those that consider themselves fans, Stan Chiefs, if you will, have never touched a single page of the 30 official Halo books out there. That's not to mention the Halo Wars series of spin-off games, which are clearly marketed more to a post-StarCraft audience than the pure shooter fan base that the core games are trying to reach. On top of that, you have official movies, a live-action series, some comics, and various ARGs that all create a narrative structure which exists entirely outside of the primary game series. The problem here is that the primary product around which all of this is ostensibly based, the Halo game series itself, showcases a comparatively small portion of this bloated canon. Starting with Combat Evolved, Bungie already had a loose framework of a universe, inspired by one of their previous projects, Marathon, in mind for a third-person shooter which was planned to release on Apple computers sometime in 2000. But when Microsoft acquired Bungie, and the IP that would eventually become the Halo series, their timeline was instantly compressed, and that, combined with a change in gameplay mechanics due to the move to Xbox, left little time to work on any part of the universe you wouldn't directly visit in-game. These time and studio constraints would go on to plague at least the next 2 Halo projects, compounding the issue until eventually the series was left with a player base that largely misunderstood or had a very narrow understanding of what was actually happening in the game, which is kind of the whole reason I do these videos. I personally think they did a decent job of trying to reverse this course with Halo Reach and the complex meta-narrative of Halo 4, but because of this shift in focus, many of Halo's original audience, such as myself, found these games to be a slightly uncomfortable departure from the series' established pace and tone. Reach's story necessitated party mechanics and a focus on characterization that, while in vogue at the time, were decidedly not Halo. And the expectation in Halo 4 that the player buy into this epic backstory from the opening sequence that was only winked at in previous titles left the community pretty divided on whether or not the Halo canon had completely lost the plot. And we're not even going to talk about Hardlight Cortana. I'd be interested to know what you think about how Halo chooses to tell its story, and maybe we'll revisit your comments in a later video. For now, let's get back to it.
We must be in the brig. These look like holding cells. There are probably multiple detention stations. The captain must be in one of them. We need to keep looking for him.
The signal from Captain Keyes eventually leads you to what Cortana calls the ship's control center. Though again, everything looks exactly the same as every other part of the ship until you get to the brig where Keyes is being held. The captain is begrudgingly grateful, and he shares what he's learned so far, while Cortana gets onto Covenant Google to find some exposition.
According to the data in their networks, the ring has some kind of deep religious significance. If I'm analyzing this correctly, they believe that Halo is some kind of weapon, one with vast, unimaginable power.
I would play the original cutscenes for these, but honestly the mocap in the Anniversary Edition scenes is so hilariously bad that I feel like it makes them more enjoyable to watch. Anyways, after recovering keys, you need to work your way back through the level to the docking bay, eventually finding a ship you can hotwire to get the hell out of Dodge. Startlingly, the captain knows how to fly Covenant dropships with the precision of a young Anakin Skywalker, and the crew escapes with everyone alive.
Hang on.
Nice one, sir.
Time for a little payback.
The Covenant believe that what they call the silent cartographer is somewhere under this island. The cartographer is a map room that will lead us to Halo's control center. The island has multiple structures and installations. One of them contains the map room.
It's unclear how much time passes here, but eventually the Master Chief, Cortana, and all of the forces you've rescued so far reunite on this random island to investigate something called the Silent Cartographer. Despite my misgivings about its lack of story, I can't adequately express how effective Halo is at giving you exactly enough information to vaguely understand what's going on, and then backing off to let you wail on some baddies. It's hard to strike that balance, and I can't think of many other games that do this that well. At least, not from that era. Shortly after you touch down, Foehammer delivers.
You know our motto, we deliver.
A warthog for you, you grab 2 comrades, and set out to explore. I have far too much fun with the vehicles in these games. Arriving at what Cortana believes must be the location of the cartographer, Chief... Okay, I don't think that's gonna work. Well, the Covenant locks the door, and we've got a new goal, or as Cortana puts it...
We need to find the security override to get this door open.
So Master Chief does a little spelunking, and comes across a couple hunters. I'm not entirely sure what happened to my companions at this point, they just sort of stayed behind at the Warthog. But after a few minutes, the Chief finds his way into this strange building, and is greeted by more ammo sponges. Activating a holo panel at the back of the structure, Master Chief disables the security system. Which means more of that classic Halo story mode magic of running back through the level you just played, but in reverse.
Let's move down the beach. Keep an eye out for any cargo we can salvage.
Cortana at least lets us know we can expect to see some heavy ordnance soon, and we reunite with our Warthog buddies.
Oh, yeah!
Jesus Christ, man. Finally back at the structure that hides the silent cartographer, Master Chief makes his way inside. We get another stealth-adjacent sequence here, but I didn't have time for that, so... And after a few minutes of mowing down Covenant, we get an update on what's happening topside. Cortana discovers that Halo's control center is in some sort of shrine, and reaches out to Captain Keyes to share the location. But for some reason, he's not picking up the phone. When the Chief and Cortana make it topside, they're greeted by a small Covenant welcome party, which they quickly dispatch. And Foehammer comes to pick them up.
Cortana, these coordinates are underground.
The Covenant did a thorough seismic scan, and my analysis shows that Halo is honeycombed with deep tunnels, which circle the whole ring.
Cortana comes up with an epic big-brain plan to effectively conduct an air raid underground, so Foehammer drops the Chief off as far down as they can go. It turns out that the interior of Halo's structure is a network of open spaces, which makes sense if you're going to build a planet-sized installation like this. You'd naturally want to use as little material as possible. Speaking of pragmatic design, this section of level takes roughly the same room and copy-pastes it about 10 times, with narrow halls and an occasional bridge leading you from one room to the next. It gets pretty stale, but we do learn here that the Halo contains a variety of biomes, and Fireteam Zulu, Sergeant Johnson's unit, reaches out to request assistance. There really is more stealth in this game than I remembered. Anyway, the Chief eventually meets up with Fireteam Zulu, who are somehow holding their own against a fleet of Covenant heavy weapons. But after clearing the opposition, they can't get an aerial evac because of the whole, underground thing. So they board some ghosts and move out with Master Chief and Cortana leading the way. I'm fairly certain the soldiers are supposed to keep following you through this next part, but just like the Warthog sequence earlier, the AI kinda got lost and left me on my own. After taking down a battalion of Covenant forces, the team emerges again from the underworks of Halo to rough up some more baddies. Eventually, the Chief makes it to the shrine-like structure they've been searching for, and falls off an elevator. Wait, let's try this again. Master Chief heads inside to find... that's not supposed to be here, and realizes he's still got a ways to go. After one of the longest combat sequences in the game between story beats, Cortana chimes in.
The entrance to the control center is at the top of that pyramid structure. Bring me up there and I should be able to get us inside.
So the Chief works his way through a few more copies of the same chamber, eventually making it outside and up the face of this gigantic structure. I will say this last push up the walkway here was intense even on normal. It reminded me of why it is I love this game so much. Every kill, between the visuals, the sound design, and the versatile AI, just feels so satisfying. Having made his way to the actual entrance of the shrine temple thing, the Chief gets quite the welcoming party and heads inside. Or, if you're me, this happens. And then I forgot there was fall damage. Anyway, once inside, we get a very important cinematic.
This is it, Halo's control center. That terminal, try there.
You all right?
Never been better. You can't imagine the wealth of information. The knowledge, so much, so fast. It's glorious.
So, what sort of weapon is it?
What are you talking about?
Let's stay focused. Halo, how do we use it against the Covenant?
Yes, the Forerunner built this place, what they called a fortress world, in order to... Wait. No, that can't be. Oh, those Covenant fools. They must have known. There must have been signs.
Slow down. You're losing me.
The Covenant found something. Buried in this ring. Something horrible. And now, they're afraid.
Something buried? Where?
The captain. We've got to stop the captain.
Keys? What
The
are we...
weapons cache he's looking for. It's not really... We can't let him get inside.
I don't understand.
There's no time. Get out of here, find keys, stop him. Before it's too late!
Jumping ahead in time a bit, Foehammer drops off Master Chief at Captain Key's last known location. Over 12 hours ago, he and his team went radio silent, and it's the Chief's job to find out what happened. This might be my favorite level in terms of visuals. It's in such stark contrast to anything else we've seen so far, and the later, more mechanical portions turn the Forerunner aesthetic up to 11. Though I will concede that the Anniversary Edition you're looking at here lights up this area quite a bit too much, taking away from the dark and dingy vibe. Following Key's last known signal, Master Chief arrives at a mysterious space elevator and just sort of rolls with it. Though, of course, the Covenant are also here. They seem to be guarding a strange chamber, scarred with blood spatters and bathed in green ambience. A new color grade for the story so far. Moments later, the Chief finds a lone soldier still alive, clearly traumatized by some recent experience, and puts him out of his misery. We see more fallen comrades as the Chief pushes deeper into the complex, and soon arrive here. Poor Jenkins. I hope he's living as a happy space zombie somewhere. Playing back the last few clips from Jenkins' helmet cam, or maybe neural link, I'm not sure, we learned Fireteam Zulu had chased the Covenant here and reunited with the captain.
Oh, KIA.
Real pretty. Friend of yours?
Nah, we just met.
Discovering a door that the Covenant had heavily secured, the humans naturally got curious, and they came face to face with a new type of enemy, the Flood.
I don't... There! Mira! Hold still! Hold still!
Let him have it! Sergeant, we're surrounded!
God damn it, Jenkins! Fire your weapons! There are too many, Sarge!
We'll learn more about what exactly the Flood are in later episodes, but the gist is that they're a parasitic alien species that turns dead bodies into zombies. And for some reason, they were being kept here on this Halo installation. This of course also means that as long as there are more of these little fungal jellyfish crab things in a room with some bodies, you're gonna keep getting more zombies. So the solution becomes blow everything the fuck up. The rest of the chapter sees Chief doing exactly that as he tries to escape, now that we have no idea where Captain Keyes has gone. It's a long chapter with a lot of recycled rooms, but the constant pace of this sequence keeps it engaging. And it does give you plenty of time to learn exactly what makes the Flood tick in terms of game mechanics. At some point, the Chief makes his way to the exit and reunites with part of Fireteam Zulu, where Foehammer plans to pick up the whole crew. But instead of making it to the LZ with everyone else, Master Chief is teleported away from the gunfight by a character so many of us both adore and despise. 343 Guilty Spark.
I am the monitor of Installation 04. I am 343 Guilty Spark. Someone has released the Flood. My function is to prevent it from leaving this installation, but I require your assistance.
Guilty Spark leads the Chief down corridor after flood-ridden corridor of the library, all while just being a cheeky bastard. He does eventually provide some help by dispatching the Sentinels, though. I could be more detailed here, but this level is so fucking long, and it's literally just running down hallways, so we'll skip ahead to the end. Or rather, the index. Because it has end in the...
Protocol requires that I take possession of the index for transport. Your organic form renders you vulnerable to infection. The index must not fall into the hands of the Flood before we reach the control room and activate the installation.
Yeah, that's what we call a red flag. 343 teleports the Chief to the control room, where Cortana sheds some light on what's really going on.
I've spent the last 12 hours cooped up in here watching you toady about, helping that thing get set to slit our throats.
Hold on now. He's a friend.
Oh, I didn't realize. He's your pal, is he? Your chum? Do you have any idea what that bastard almost made you do?
The mocap is so bad, I love it. It's like Halo went full circle and they're just making their own machinima now.
A construct in the core? That is absolutely unacceptable.
Sod off!
What in reverence? I shall purge you at once!
You sure that's a good idea?
How dare you? Oh!
Do what? I have the index. You can just float and sputter.
Enough!
Halo doesn't kill Flood. It kills their food. Humans, Covenant, whatever. We're all equally edible.
Is it true?
More or less. Technically, this installation's pulse has a maximum effective radius of 25,000 light years. But once the others follow suit, this galaxy will be quite devoid of life.
So it turns out Halo is less like a targeted strike and more like a blunt instrument, destroying all sentient life in its blast radius when activated. Guilty Spark tells Chief to hand over the Hatsune Cortana, or there will be consequences. And naturally, our boy in green refuses, meaning the human forces not only have Covenant and Flood to contend with, but now an ancient laser-wielding magical AI with an apocalypse fetish.
Save his head. Dispose of the rest.
I couldn't figure out where to put this in the video, so it's going here. Also, the footage is dark now, because it's much later in the day. I don't have much else to give to the discussion around Halo as far as narrative or cultural analysis, which is why there aren't very many commentary corners in this video. But over the years, Halo has given me a lot, and I wanted to just chat about that before we get into the last chapter. Combat Evolved released when I was 11. If I remember correctly, my brother and I got an Xbox that Christmas. By that point, we were comfortably upper middle class, and we got to pick a few games for it. My first choice was The Elder Scrolls Morrowind, of course, but we also got Halo, and it quickly became a time-consuming staple around which countless parties, sleepovers, friendships, and naturally arguments would revolve. To this day, like so many other people, I get chills hearing the original arrangement of the Halo theme. I have so many fond memories of booting up the console and plopping down in my beanbag chair, playing local LAN with friends on the weekends. When Halo 2 came out in 2004, I was a freshman trying to find my way and make friends in high school. Fortunately, I lived right down the street from the campus, so my house became the place for my fellow band nerds to go drink too much Mountain Dew and practice various glitches on Coag. We were so sad when the patch came out. Side note, I found this amazing time capsule of a video about Halo 2 glitches from 2006. It's very good. It has a MySpace page in the credits. Link in the doobly-doo. I had to leave a lot of those friends behind in 2005 when my family had to move again. I was devastated not to have those consistent social gatherings. But Halo was this cultural touchstone at the time, a sort of safety blanket in which myself and other socially inept band nerds could find comfort. I changed a lot in high school, eventually leaving shooters, and console gaming for that matter, behind completely. But were it not for Halo, I genuinely wouldn't have the same life I have today. I wouldn't have made the same friends, at least not as easily. And I can't think of a healthier coping method for social anxiety than a relatively accessible video game like this series has always been, especially when you consider the alternatives. Oh, that rye is really bad. I guess all of that is just to say, teach your kids how to play video games? Maybe? I don't know, there doesn't have to be a moral. I honestly just like talking about myself. I mean, why else have a YouTube channel, right? Let's finish the story.
We can't let the monitor activate Halo. We have to stop him. We have to destroy Halo.
Cortana has a plan to stop Guilty Spark from getting his way and using Master Chief's meat suit to activate the ring. If the Pillar of Autumn's, the ship they rode in on, fusion reactors are still somewhat intact, overloading them in just the right way might pack enough punch to render Halo inoperational.
I haven't located the crash site yet, but we need to buy some time, in case the Monitor or his Sentinels find a way to activate Halo's final weapon without the index.
God, the soundtrack is just fantastic. Also, the 12-year-old in me remembered there was a sniper up here somehow, and the dose of nostalgia was intoxicating, to say the least. After working his way back down the metal mountainside, the Chief commandeers a Banshee, so he can head to each of these pulse generators, which amplify the power of the Halo weapon. It turns out this also means we get to do our favorite thing and play through a level we've already beat again, but in reverse. Even though I did this part on easy, I still died so much during the bridge sequences. I don't know if they're particularly difficult or if I'm just particularly reckless when I'm playing a game like this. Probably a little more of column B than column A. After Chief destroys 2 pulse generators and takes out as many Covenant scum as possible along the way, Cortana says she's located the Pillar of Autumn.
She put down 1,200 kilometers upspin. Energy readings show her fusion reactors are still powered up.
So we still need to find keys. Re-emerging from Halo's underworks, Master Chief sets the last pulse generator in his sights and...
Target neutral.
Come on, it's like I wasn't even trying. Anyway, the Chief blows up the last MacGuffin. God damn it, I'm so bad at this! But it's okay, because Cortana has learned how to teleport the Chief after studying Guilty Spark and the Halo's systems. Pretty cool, if a little Deus Ex Machina. Cortana transports the Chief to a Covenant ship on which she's detecting Key's signal. And then we hear the captain reach out over the comms, begging the Chief in a terribly pained voice to just leave him. But we need him, or at least his brain, so we're not giving up. Master Chief's path is blocked by damage to the ship, and he has to take a brief detour outside before finding his way to the ship's gravity lift again, constantly being pelted by Covenant and Flood forces along the way. Inside, Cortana once again directs the Chief to the ship's control room, but the Covenant battle net is all garbled and she's having trouble navigating it correctly. It looks like the Flood are infesting this ship with some purpose, which, if I remember correctly, will be important in later games. But for now, the Chief moves on to the control room, as Captain Keyes pleads for him to turn around. After an intense final push to the Captain, we see the terrifying reason he wanted the Chief to leave.
No human life signs detected. The Captain, he's one of them. We can't let the Flood get off this ring. You know what he'd expect. What he'd want us to do.
Yum. Now to head back to the Jesus fucking Christ shit! Anyway, the Chief and Cortana hijack a Banshee and book it to the Pillar of Autumn, hoping to put an end to this whole confrontation by disabling the Halo's destructive abilities at whatever cost.
Pull up! You did that on purpose, didn't you?
The Chief guns down a variety of Flood, which have already started swarming the Autumn, and makes his way to the bridge so Cortana can jack into the Matrix or whatever. I think it's worth noting that the Flood, and even Halo itself for that matter, represent deeply existential threats to humanity, but Cortana and the Chief are completely unfazed. The levity throughout here is probably just supposed to communicate them being hardened badasses, but in this moment it feels especially inappropriate in a way that kind of takes away some of the finale's emotional weight for me. They're quickly interrupted by Guilty Spark, who tries to do the whole all your base are belong to us thing and disables the self-destruct sequence.
Why do you continue to fight us, Reclaimer? You cannot win! Give us the construct, and I will endeavor to make your death relatively painless and...
At least I still have control over the comm channels.
So now we have a new plan, manual detonation. As much as this game reuses map components, coming back to the autumn for this final sequence feels great. The way the game's story folds in on itself makes it feel concise and consistent in a way that I don't think any of the other Halo games were ever able to replicate completely. After picking up some rockets in the armory, the Chief heads down to engineering and gets to clearing his pipes. After Chief exposes each shaft, he shoots his load and the engine... I don't know, something climax. I'm really reaching, but we're almost done here. Arriving in the vehicle bays, they hop in a Warthog and get the hell out of there, hoping to reunite with Foehammer for an extract. Sadly, Foehammer is downed by some Covenant Banshees.
Evade! I'm hit! Mayday! Mayday! Airport system is shot to hell! I can't hold her! I can't hold her!
But hey, there's one more ship in the bays and it just might be able to get us out of here. How convenient! The combination of music, VO, and visuals here makes this like 10-second sequence absolutely pulse-pounding.
Need to get aboard now!
Our hero gets to the longsword just in time to...
We're cutting it close!
Here we go. Did anyone else make it?
Scanning. Just dust and echoes. We're all that's left. We did what we had to do for Earth. An entire Covenant armada obliterated, and the Flood. We had no choice. Halo, it's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.
Knowing where Cortana's character arc would eventually end up, I think that line about doing what we had to do is surprisingly poignant, but you can tell here that at least the Chief understands the weight of this situation. This really is just the beginning. Speaking of the beginning, get subscribed if you aren't already because we're just getting started here. The next two What Really Happened videos will be on Halo 2 and 3, and if I can fit them in, we might do Reach and Halo 4 by the time Infinite launches. I'd like to use those videos to touch on Great Man history, nostalgia goggles, and obviously some more game design tips. My schedule for illustration commissions and various life things will be picking up a bit for the next couple months, so the channel will be mostly focused on streams for a while, including Minecraft and some more classic games with my friends Alex and Jonathan from Plantastic Fanit. Also, we have a Discord at join.josephrstrom.com where you can chat with us in between videos and get notified for streams, all that stuff. You can also share your work with others there. So, you know, it's a good place to meet maybe some like-minded people and also get updates on everything I'm doing in my free time. We've already got a pretty cool community developing on there, although it is ridiculously small right now, obviously. So come hang out and maybe get on the Minecraft server to escape from the utterly terrible reality in which we find ourselves. Also, I'm sort of rebranding to my original online name, Speak With Animals. If you've already subscribed, then there's no change for you there. I don't even know why I'm mentioning it, actually, because it won't affect anybody. But that's the channel name now. It's Speak With Animals. It's not my name anymore. Anyways, the reason for that is because this channel is going to be for exclusively gaming stuff going forward. All of my music stuff is going to the Plantastic Fanit channel. Link up there if you're watching this, where you can go subscribe there. If you're here for the music stuff, go there to look for that stuff. Okay, I think those are all the updates for now. Again, like, comment, subscribe, all that, you know, YouTube stuff. Thank you all so much for watching, seriously, especially if you made it all the way to the end. Oh, real quick, link to some songs that I just released in the doobly-doo. I just remembered that. Okay, seriously, that's the last update. Until next time, I love you. Bye. I'm getting increasingly caffeinated and drunk the longer these cars are making me do additional takes. We get another stealth adjacent sequence here, but this motherfucker. You can hear him from fucking 2 blocks away. Okay. How is he that loud?